Hello, it's Shadow the Rat, and today I wanted to make a video about my favorite method of introducing together strange rats. If you've ever had to intro rats before, you've probably come across several methods for doing so. The three main methods I know of are the side-by-side cage slump method, where you switch the strange rats between each other's cages in an attempt to make them less reactive to each other's scent, then clean out your main cage and place both rats into it. The neutral territory method, where you place all strange rats into a neutral territory, and once they get along there, move them to a clean main cage. And the carrier method, where you place all the rats you wish to introduce in a small carrier, and gradually move them into larger and larger cages once they start to get along, finally culminating in you moving them into the main cage. The method I will be discussing today is the carrier method. Back when I first wanted to introduce my rats this way, I was disappointed at the lack of videos that showed the process step by step, and that explained what you should expect. So I decided to make one myself, in hopes of helping anyone else who's interested in using this method. So, you might be asking yourself, just what advantages does the carrier method have over the other methods? Well, the main answer to that is that the confined space makes serious fighting less likely, as rats dislike fighting in small spaces. The small space also adds a bit of stress to the equation, which can help facilitate quicker bonding between strange rats. And finally, the carrier method cuts out the main reason that rats get injured during intros, which is flight. Since the initial carrier is so small, rats have no option to flee or chase each other, which actually greatly reduces the chance of injury. That's not to say the carrier method is perfect. Of course, in some cases, fights do happen. That's why for the first part, I encourage anyone attempting this method to have a squirt bottle and some heavy-duty gloves or a towel available for separating the rats if need be. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get started. The first thing you'll want to do is acquire a small cage or carrier of some kind. If you have a travel carrier for your rats, this should work just fine. I'm going to be using my 5-gallon critter carrier for this demonstration, as it makes it easier to see what the rats inside are doing. Now that you have your carrier, you'll want to clean it out and add new bedding. Once you've added the bedding, sprinkle some of your rats' main food around the area. The reason you don't want to use a bowl in this case is because it's a physical object, and you don't want any rats trying to claim it, and thus become more defensive towards the other rats. Finally, add in a water bottle. If you're using a tank like me, the easiest way to do this is to place some Velcro onto the bottle and the side of the cage. Now take out all your rats and place them into the carrier. I usually like to place my newest rats in the carrier first, as I find that they tend to be less defensive. Now close the lid and just sit back and watch. Keep in mind that the rats I'm using for this demonstration are already bonded, so while my girls are actively trying to get out, they aren't displaying any of the behaviors that rats will commonly display towards strangers. The main key to this method is to not separate the rats unless you absolutely must. So if your rats are force grooming each other or acting a bit defensive, it's a good idea to wait it out rather than separate them. Behaviors that people typically view as aggressive are piloerection, when the rat raises its fur, crab walking, when the rat walks sideways, and if the rats facing off target each other's rear, as opposed to targeting their neck and scruff. Even if you see any of these behaviors, you want to keep the rats together if possible, as separating them will just draw out the intro period. Once your rats are behaving calm and social towards each other in the carrier, it's time to upgrade your carrier to a larger cage. Calm behaviors in this cage would be gentle grooming or sleeping together in a pile, as you see my girls doing on screen. This will usually take a few hours at least, or even up to a few days, as not only do the rats have to get comfortable with each other, but it can take them some time to begin to relax inside the carrier. Do not move on to a larger cage until your rats are clearly comfortable with each other. If this takes a few days, so be it. Once your rats are behaving friendly towards each other, you'll want to move them to a larger intermediate cage. The next cage that I use for the carrier process is a 10-gallon wire hamster cage. But if you're planning on introducing more than a few rats, you might need to use a larger cage. The key is to find a cage with little height, as fleeing rats tend to try and go upwards, something we want to prevent. Put bedding and scattered food into this cage, along with a water bottle. Don't add any items for now, as like with the food bowl, we don't want the rats to become territorial over anything. We also want to make sure the rats can't corner each other, as this way they could cause some injuries. Again, add in your rats and wait for them to behave friendly towards each other. Once you see them grooming or sleeping together, chances are you're ready for the next step. The next step is to introduce flat toys into the cage. Flat toys are things like hammocks, ropes, ladders, and other things that the rats have trouble defending. Once your rats are again displaying common social behaviors, even with these new toys, you can go ahead and add in some enclosed toys. Since I'm using such a small cage as my intermediate one, I only have room to add one of each toy type. But if you're using a larger cage, feel free to add a few more. Once your rats are behaving calmly and acting sociable towards each other with these enclosed toys, it's time to thoroughly clean out your largest cage. Again, add in bedding, scattered food, and a water bottle, but no other toys and accessories. Then add in your rats, and again, wait for them to behave calmly in this larger space. This cage will often be the most difficult step, as if you go into it too fast, the residential rats may become territorial with the strangers. But if you've been going at your rat's pace throughout all these steps, this step shouldn't be too difficult. You'll want to wait until your rats are displaying calm and sociable behaviors in the empty cage before moving on. Now add in some flat toys, just as you did in the intermediate cage. Wait until your rats are acting friendly with each other, then finally add in the rest of your enclosed toys. You can also add in a food bowl if you want at this point. If your rats have been good up to this step, chances are this step will go fairly easy. But if they seem to regress and become more aggressive towards each other, you'd always go back a step and wait until they do well there before trying again. During this entire intro, whether it takes hours or days, you don't want to give the rats free range. That's because free range together is basically the ultimate test of bonds for the rats, as it's a large area that allows the rats to fight and chase each other freely. Once your rats are doing well with all types of toys in your large cage, free ranging can resume without any issue. And that's all there is to it. The carrier method is my absolute favorite for introducing rats, mainly because it allows you to introduce even relatively aggressive rats, or shy rats, with decent success. Good luck to anyone introducing strange rats out there. It can be a difficult process, but once the rats are bonded together, it's all worth it. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.